of my presentation is a new measurement called RoA for estimating the audience rate of a family of web radio stations. I'm from Benin University of Abomey-Calavi. The outline, after introduction, in section 2, I present the RoA concept and experimental results. This presentation is concluded and perspective is present in section 3. Introduction. In the world of media, the audience rate of or audience share is the number or percentage of people who have had access to a medium over a given period of time. However, it is not the only audience indicator for the media. There is also the average audience, the cumulative audience, the listener time. Several methods are used to measure the different indicators. Several methods are used today to evaluate a radio station audience. The most widely used of them are telephone surveys and diaries. To the telephone survey approach, individuals are interviewed by telephone. They declare what they have listening to and how long they have listening to it. The pollster does not take into account the length of time the respondent's listener, but only the radio program with which he or she come into contact. In the diary approach, people are asked to record all the radio stations they're listening to over a 7-day period. For each quarter of an hour, they must indicate the station they're listening to. The platform used, for example, a radio station, a smartphone, or another device, and the location where they are, home or car or work. Diary can be completed digitally via computers, tablet, or smartphone, or on paper, depending on user preference. However, the method have certain shortcomings as following. 1, listener to radio is not directly measured. The results are the product of the respondents' answers. The people must use their memory when questioning. It is therefore difficult to verify that the men and women answering the question are perfectly telling the truth. The impartiality of the question asked is also sometimes called into question. The RoA was created to overcome the various limitations and automate the process of determining audience rate. The radio online audience calling RoA is a new approach that tracks and measures web radio audience in real time to provide a more accurate estimate. As a result, it is possible to identify the best radio station among many others by assessing its broadcasting performance. Developed for the ACPM, accessible to this link, developing for the ACPM monitoring system, but can be used for any web radio. In this section, we present the concept and experimental results. Consider the following variable involved in the calculation of the RoA. N is the number of radio subject to the calculation. I, a number representing a radio. R, a range of geographic listening region. A, the lower bound of a time interval representing the beginning of the broadcast period of radio I in the region R. And B is the upper limit of the time interval representing the end of the broadcasting period of radio I in the region R. The input parameters for each radio I are F, the broadcasting frequency of the radio I in the region R over the time interval AB, and the number NIREB, the number of radio listener I in the region R over the time interval AB, and TIREB, the average listening time of all radio listening I in the region R over the time interval AB. WF, WN, and WT, the weight respectively associated with the broadcasting frequency, the number of listeners, and the average listening time of all radio listening I in the region R over the time interval AB. Note that WF, WN, and WT are chosen such that WF and WN and WT equals 1. The equation 1 presents the expression of the new measurement called RoA, denoted by RoA IREB, the score of the radio I in the region R over the time interval AB. We have the following expression presented in equation 1. Equation 2, 3, 4 present our parameter F and T. NIREB and T, IREB having order of magnitude different from F. Before the evaluation of Formula 1, we proceed to a normalization of each value. This normalization depends on the values of all the radio presented in the ecosystem. Note that there are several methods of normalization data. Since the processed value do not consist of outlier, we have chosen the min-max normalization method. Equation 5 and 6 give me the normalization value of N and T. The best radio station is identified by using the formula 7, the max. We apply in all radio RoA the max formula to show the best radio. Here in this section, we present the default value of each parameter WN, WT, and WF. After several experimental tests and statistical analysis of data collected from a sample of radio from the Africa Web Radio ecosystem, it was decided to allocate equal weight to the parameters number of listeners, WN, and average listeners time, WT, for a value of 0.4 against a value of 0.4 for the broadcast frequency. In this section, we present the application of my method to the platform Africa Web Radio. Table 1 presents evaluation of RoA on a sample of 12 radio from the Africa Web Radio ecosystem. Column 8 presents the RoA of each radio. Note that the radio with the largest RoA is the radio R5 here, it's here. With the largest number of listeners, one of the largest average listener time, and a broadcast frequency tending toward 1. The method called RoA is applied to ACPM ecosystem. ACPM ecosystem in French is l'Alliance pour les chiffres de la presse et des médias, is a radio ecosystem. We applied the RoA concept to this ecosystem, and the table 2 presents evaluation of RoA on a sample of 128 radio from ACPM ecosystem accessed to this link. In this presentation, we chose seven results to present here. The figure 1 presents in graph the ranking graph of the radio station in French according to ACPM and the RoA method. In red color, we present the RoA method. It appears that our method places France Inter Radio first, same position as the ACPM ranking, with RoA equals this value. Radio RTL, previously fourth on the ACPM ranking, is second with the RoA equal this with a RoA equal this value. Menergie, previously 122 second position on the ACPM ranking, takes 5 with a RoA equal this value. For the broadcasting time, we assume that the radio broadcasts almost constantly over the studio period. The application of our formula on the data of the ACPM platform reveals that the use of a single parameter to measure the audience rate is insufficient. To conclude, so my communication say that the traditional method of audience measurement, such as telephone survey and audience diary, although widely used, have some shortcomings, such as the lack of precision and subjectivity. The proposal of the method for calculating the RoA, radio online audience, appears as an added value to improve the method for determining the audience rate of web radio. The method RoA is promising to provide a more precise and real-time measurement of the audience rate of web radio. In perspective, a monitoring system for a family of web radio integrating the concept of automatic evaluation of RoA will be proposed. The system will integrate in authentication session platform, providing more information of the profile of listener in order to improve the accuracy of the estimation of this parameter. The question of choosing the weight WF, WN, and WT efficiently remain an issue that will be studied in our future work. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I would like to know if any questions from forum. There are no questions, and thank you once again for your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to invite the next author, Albert T. Modi from University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, entitled On Consistent Relationship of Both Water Content and Activity with Maize Seed Quality Indices. Albert, are you there? You can share your screen.
Okay, okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. May I ask the previous author to stop sharing?
Yeah. Tahirou, yeah, he stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me attempt to share my screen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's visible and you can go ahead, Professor.
Okay, let me start at the beginning. Thank you very much again for the great opportunity. It was quite enjoyable to go through the process of writing this article. As the chair has already said, I come from South Africa. I am a biological scientist focusing mainly in agricultural plant physiology. My presentation is looking at the concepts of water content and water activity and how they affect the quality of maize seed from the perspective of agriculture as well as food sciences. This is the outline of my presentation. I will give it as it appears in the main article with the introduction, the methodology, results, discussion, and conclusions. I would like to thank the reviewers of the paper for actually making sure that I emphasize some main issues on this paper, particularly in the context of the relevance. There are two main areas. The first area is the Quality International Society that is called ISTA, which was established many, many decades ago. And it continues to come up with some indices. So germination and vigor are the indices that have been accepted for many years. But what is actually lacking in terms of literature is how we connect this physiological performance of the seeds with the biochemistry that is actually happening inside the seed itself, and more importantly, how the crop then performs in the end with respect to the environmental conditions. So the objective of the paper was to look at the existing indices of germination and vigor and try to explain their relationship, water content, the relationship of water content and water activity, and as to how they affect the vigor, looking at the crop from different perspectives. Literature that has been published does show the relationship between the moisture content and the water content. And as you can see here, the maximum germination can be 100% and the maximum water content can be 1. And in food sciences, there are general expectations by the industry in terms of what moisture content is going to be there and what water activity is going to be there. So I'm taking this from the published literature where it shows the relationship between moisture content and water activity. And I want to see whether in my study this relationship applies. And another important thing to highlight, as I indicated, is the biochemistry that is related with this water content and water activity, particularly in the food industry, but of course, as well as in the agriculture industry. The reason for this is that at different stages of seed development, you get the accumulation of minerals, the accumulation of carbohydrates and proteins. And as these accumulate, they change the water content as well as water activity. But the question is, how do they change the quality of the seed from the perspective of the physiological role of producing a new crop? But in the food industry, people can harvest the crop before it reaches what is called physiological maturity. In other words, before the maize becomes very dry. So in the materials and methods, I looked at different aspects. And the first one was to choose a site where the study can be done. Because it's a preliminary study, what we decided to do was to choose 4 sites in an area that has got a uniformity of environmental conditions. It's a farm of 4,000 hectares in South Africa, in a place called KwaZulu-Natal. And these sites were selected to be a minimum of 50 kilometers from, and they were then used as replications. So the alternative to this is to repeat the study over many years, but we thought we should start by selecting these sites this year and making them different sites. So we grew maize of the same color, which was yellow maize, different varieties of the maize, hybrids that are already in the market. And we selected the main cob from the maize. And our aim was to follow the changes in moisture content as well as water activity from 30 days after pollination to 90 days after pollination. So we had 3 pollination stages of harvest, which was 30, 60, and 90. And then we harvested the cobs at these different stages. The second factor was looking at the quality of the seeds at different parts, the 3 different parts, which is the top part, the middle part, and the bottom part. And we referred to them as the tip, the middle, and the bottom. Of course, it is important, and again, I want to thank the reviewers of my paper. It is important to clearly distinguish the meaning of water content and moisture content from the biosciences perspective. So the moisture content basically refers to the amount of water that is bound and the free water in a sample. So if you've got a sample, is water that is bound, there is also the free water. So this is a quantitative amount of water in that sample. So you can think now of our maize at different parts of the maize crop as that sample. So we removed the kernels and we're looking at how much water is there from two perspectives, moisture content and water activity. On the other hand, the water activity is the amount of free water in the sample. And it is a measurement of the energy status of the water in the system. And this energy status is then going to have a different role from the biochemical perspective compared to the moisture content. So our results, the first thing that we did was to see whether the known relationship between the water content and water activity exists as you harvest the maize at different stages of maturation. So you can imagine you having planted the maize, it's pollinated. And another thing that you must know, those of you who are not plant scientists or agricultural scientists, is that when maize is pollinated, the silks are not pollinated at the same time. The first ones to be pollinated are the ones that are in the middle, and the last ones to be pollinated would be the ones that would be at the tip of the core. So what does this mean in terms of the water content and the water activity? If you look at my graph here, it shows this relationship that is very highly correlated. As you can see there, the R values as well as the regression line, showing them that they are changing the same way from 30 days to 90 days after pollination. And then we looked at the water content and the accumulation of dry matter in the seed. And of course, there's a negative correlation there, as you can see, that as the water content goes down, the dry matter accumulation goes up to a certain level. But what is interesting is that towards the end, the dry matter content starts going down also a little bit because of the accumulation of high levels of fiber and different types of carbohydrates, as well as utilization of these materials to create what is going to be the future biochemistry of the plant, of the seed. The same thing happened when you look at the water content and grain water content, the grain mass, the relationship was the same. So up to this point, what it tells us now is that water content and water activity are basically the same in terms of how the seed responds to them. And then we said, look, we could analyze how much protein, how much starch, carbohydrates, different types of carbohydrates, minerals, and even vitamins. But for the purposes of this study, we decided to look at the total starch content. And of course, you can assume that, okay, the total starch content should not be very much different from the dry matter content. And it was very clear, again, that the changes in the water content and the accumulation of starch show a similar pattern, except that the amounts are very much different. But you can see the difference. You know, if you look at this slide and you see how the starch accumulation occurs in relation to water content, and you look at this slide, and you can see that the water activity is closer to starch compared to water content. That explains that even though there's a similarity, there is a difference. Now, what is this difference? And our assumption, and in fact, our view is that this difference is in the biochemistry, and that's what a future study needs to do. And I'm going to come back to that when I conclude in the next few slides. The other interesting thing was, particularly for the agricultural scientists and even the farmers, was what does this mean in terms of the performance of the crop? I already talked about the normal indices of germination and vigor, but this slide is particularly aimed at advising the farmer who will be growing the crop in terms of what would happen if you grew it under cold conditions or under warm conditions. You know, currently, because of climate change, it is important for us to be aware that an environmental condition that you know as being a certain type of environmental condition could shift slightly. And a slight shift in temperature has a significant effect on the biochemistry of a plant. So we shifted it by having cold temperatures being 15 and 20 degrees, minimum and maximum, and then the warm being 20 and 30 degrees, with a view that warm one would be representing a high temperature condition under drought stress. And then we calculated the yield potential of the tip, the medium, and the bottom of the cob. And we saw a very, very significant difference between the cold and the warm, where under warm conditions, the yield potential is much higher than that of the cold conditions. And this is not a surprise because maize is a C4 crop, so it does well under those environmental conditions. But what is more interesting for somebody who's a seed farmer, somebody who's a seed company, is where do I harvest the best seed? Is it at the tip, at the medium, and at the bottom? Obviously, the tip is not a good place. The size of the seed is smaller, and its quality is not great. So the best seeds for a farmer are the ones that are coming from the medium part of the seed. So in conclusion, we conclude that yes, there is a relationship between water content and water quality, but that relationship has already been known in food sciences. But what about agriculture and seed science? We also confirmed that this relationship is also directly linked to the known indices of seed quality, which is germination and vigor. Now, what needs to happen in future, and this illustration that I'm showing you here, again, is an illustration of a published study, is if you look at the different zones of water activity and the rate of growth of the plant, we need to, in future, explain from the biochemistry perspective what is happening at each one of these zones. As you can see, the first zone is below the monolayer, and then you've got this zone 2, which is the adsorbed water, and then zone 3, where you've got the solvent water. So biochemically, what is actually happening? And so we propose a future direction that is aimed at not only assisting people in agriculture and farming, but also answering the questions of those who are in the industry, the food industry, so that we can tell them, if you harvest the maize cob and you are going to use it for different purposes, what is going to be the chemical composition of these cobs in the context of water activity and water content. So we believe that we're going to be submitting to the editors of this very interesting journal in future, more work that is very much focused now on the biochemistry from the perspective of food science and trying to relate it to the different products of food science. Thank you very much, Chair.